Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield holding it down for us in the DraftKings studio in Boston. We're brought to you by Wrangler, made for the ride of life. Save 15% on your first Wrangler.com order when you use promo code GOJO15. We got a great show for you. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review. Leave us that 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday right here on the DraftKingsNetwork.com, DraftKings YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and more. And listen, Dad, there's no two ways about it here. Last night had one main story and one main character. It was a massive, massive day for Tyrese Halliburton and the Indiana Pacers. My God, the NBA in-season tournament continues to star, and wouldn't you know it, coming off a weekend where he said he's tired of being a loser, Tyrese Halliburton decides to go out there and drop a triple-double on Boston's heads with their weird court and advance to the next round, baby. We are all in around here.
I'm not going to lie, Mike. When this thing started out, we all were saying, why are we doing this? What's going on? And as it progressed, I've gotten into it more and more. You see the funky court, you got a game, and now with it coming to the ends of quarter, semis, and finals, we had the dates to it, obviously, because before that, it was just kind of a crapshoot if I turned it on and saw a funky court and knew it was an in-season tournament game. But yeah, what a big win, and they were going nuts celebrating it. Halliburton's dad was in the crowd pointing to he was wearing a shirt with his kid's name, their name on the back, pointing like the athletes do. It was absolutely hilarious. That dude is a stud. They get a big win, 122-112 over Boston. New Orleans beats Sacramento by 10, and Sacramento's been such a hot team as well. And that Zion even only had 10 points in that one. It was Brandon Ingram who had 30, I believe. So they both move on to the semis. So they punch their ticket to Vegas, as they say, right?
My God, we will get plenty more into that actually tomorrow. Charlotte Wilder, our dear friend from the Oddball podcast, will help us get into more of that. As you're right, now we're actually starting to get to the part where I thought it would sink its teeth in, where we got to Vegas and it seemed real and all that changed. But in actuality, the NBA's in-season tournament already a massive success. But Dad, in all seriousness, one of the real stars of last night had to be Jake Browning. And I'm not saying that ironically. I'm not saying that to be funny. Last night on Monday Night Football, unfortunately for our dear friend Emerson Latzia, another voice you hear around this show, a diehard Jacksonville Jaguars fan who was in attendance for that game last night. Dad, we made so much a big deal about it, the first Monday Night Football game in so long in Jacksonville for the Jags, and Jake Browning coming in place of the injured Joe Burrow steals the show last night. 32 of 37, 354 yards, and 2 touchdowns accounted for. Dad, how did this happen? Where did this come from?
Well, I think you got to give Zach Taylor a bunch of credit for the play calling. I thought the play calling was fantastic early on. It protected him while still got the ball. This was kind of the blueprint of what we talk about when a backup quarterback comes in. Because what's the first thing you want to do from either side of the ball? Defensively, you say, we have to pick up the slack. Offensively, you have to say, let's make it as easy as we can. You've dealt with this at dealing with a backup quarterback. Let's make it as easy as we can on the quarterback. That means let's get our running game going. How's 156 yards compared to 25 yards rushing last week? So you get the running game going, you get the short passing game going, and then, oh, by the way, hit a 70-yarder or 70-plus yarder over the top to your guy Jamar Chase, and just let him do his thing like he did last night. So this was almost picture perfect because everybody says it. How do you battle a young quarterback? How do you frazzle? And everybody has the same answer. How do you handle a backup coming in? Make it easy on him. I thought they made it easy on him. I thought the play calling was excellent, but more importantly, the execution on the field was excellent. That really kept that Jacksonville defense at bay.
It was, and Jake, to his credit after the game, talked about, hey, we were able to run the ball really well. First and foremost, when you've got Joe Mixon and Chase Brown doing the things that they did, that was probably the most surprising part to me, Dad, too, considering the strengths of this Jacksonville defense and what they had largely been considered. Defensive line, some extent linebacker, and then safety down the spine of the defense. We saw on the outside they had some trouble handling these Cincinnati wide receivers. Jamar Chase most of the game, T. Higgins with a couple of big plays late, but I was stunned that Cincinnati was able to have as much success up front against this Jacksonville defense as they were. And then it led to this, because it started off like that early, where it's a lot of easy access throws, it's a lot of stuff at or around the line of scrimmage. Jake Browning last night completed every one of his 7 pass attempts over 10 air yards. The most downfield completions without an incompletion since week 16 of 2021. He was 7 of 7 for 170 yards and a touchdown last night. And excluding 2 throwaways, Dad, he had more of his intended passes dropped than he had actual incompletions last night, according to Next Gen Stats. So they definitely did a good job game plan wise. There were well-timed screens in there to help evade pressure. Certainly having a guy the caliber of Jamar Chase go out there and pick up the slack absolutely helps. But all credit to Jake Browning. He was putting that thing where it needed to be and making the plays when he was called upon.
So we were wondering, Cincinnati, we kind of pushed them out of the playoff picture and said, maybe they'd be a thorn in somebody's side. You're looking at the wild card teams, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Indy, all 7-5, and there's Cincy 6-6. 1 loss behind in the loss column, and a quarterback playing amazingly well. To me, the biggest difference was they got the run game going. Like I said, what they didn't have last week, they got it this week. That is such a good friend of any quarterback, let alone a backup quarterback. But, Mike, how about overall the quarterback? The quarterbacks in this game. So you mentioned Jake, 32 of 57, or 32 of 37. That's 86% completion. Trevor Lawrence, who we'll get to, 22 of 29. That's 75%. And then C.J. Beathard comes in and goes 9 of 10, which is 90%. Yeah. This was the highest completion percentage in a game, I think ever, or I forgot how long since. It was 82% collectively, the completion percentage, which is the highest. I mean, all the quarterbacks were absolutely on fire, unfortunately for Trevor, until he got hurt. But boy, oh boy, I mean, pretty impressive when we weren't sure what we were going to get, out of a backup in Browning. But when Beathard had to come in, he did a nice job, going 9 of 10 and helping lead this team, to potentially, a win, game-tying field goal, and then unfortunately not the win in overtime.
Not a lot of balls touching the mat last night, but you mentioned it. We will get to, I think, the biggest story of last night, because while Jake Browning's resurgence here is phenomenal, I think no better at this point than to attach too much meaning to any one performance, given what we know about professional football, how difficult it is when the sample size starts to get bigger. We will get to that, but Jesse, it's my understanding that Jake Browning, at the very least after one performance, seems like he's in line for one of the most coveted prizes that we have in all of sports, a nickname.
Yeah, you mentioned how insanely good he was throwing the ball downfield, and that performance earned him a new nickname in the locker room.
Downtown Jake Brown, to Jamar. I mean, that's I'm making it stick. I'm making it stick.
Yeah, boy had a hell of a game. I could say that. Y'all asked about his confidence all week, and y'all just seen it there. You know what I'm saying? And, sure, you can ask nothing better than that.
He did really pretty good today, but he just showed a lot of poise and QB1 material. That's what I think.
He had a great week of practice. I thought Thursday was outstanding, and that's really our big day, our third down day. I felt really good coming out of this week, getting ready for this game, and he just lit the world on fire.
So a lot of respect.
Leave it to Big Teddy Karras, their offensive lineman.
You just love to see it. Guys, is this nickname going to stick? Probably depends on if he keeps up this level of play, right?
Yeah, I would say that would have a lot to do with it if he can still do it. The thing about it is he has the weapons to just throw the ball up, right? When you trust your receiver, even if it's close, if it's a matchup you want, you're going to hoist it up there and your receiver's going to make you look good. Now, the thing about it is, and the first rule, and he didn't do it, the first rule of nicknames is you can't give yourself a nickname, and he did not. So he gave it. Now, do you say Downtown Jake Brown, or do you say Downtown Jake Brown? Yeah, how do you do that? Since it's Browning, you just stop at Brown?
No, I think you give him the ing. That's the whole point. Is like it's not like normally when you have it. It's downtown something own is the nickname there. So this is what makes him different and special. Despite the fact that now basically like between quarterback and coach, both critical pieces of this Cincinnati team are like stock we characters. If you asked me to pick Jake Browning or Zach Taylor out of a lineup, I would not be able to do it because they are the most cookie cutter looking white people on planet Earth. So the fact that you've got that means you need to differentiate some with the nickname, and downtown Jake Browning having the ing on the end, I think is absolutely the way you do that.
I do like that. I also want to mention, because I know we're going to get to Trevor here, there were a couple of interesting family relationships in last night's game, right? Zach Taylor, the head coach for Cincinnati, his brother Press Taylor is the OC for Jacksonville, and Jacksonville had some wide receiver injuries, so Doug Peterson elevated a wide receiver from the practice squad, his son. So it was the first time a father-son were on the field since the McKays in 1976, where dad was the coach and son was on the team. So pretty cool. I don't think his son got in at all, but he was dressed, got elevated, and so how cool is that? You know, you're the head coach and your kid's on the sideline.
I personally find nepotism disgusting, but good for them. Happy that they got to have that moment, and I wish them well in their future endeavors there. By the way, Press Taylor really missed his calling to join the media there. That's looking a gift horse in the mouth and walking away from that. But congrats to Doug and his son. I remember that was a storyline there, and now they got to live out a pretty cool moment.
How about if Doug was at home and his wife was asking him how things going, and he said, "Well, we got some injuries. I'm going to have to elevate a wide receiver," and then she just stares at him like, who you're.
Well, remember he had to cut him.
Yeah,
he had to cut him.
Yeah, I know.
He was a practice squad guy for a while, so we talked about the story where he had to cut him, which had to be even more difficult. What you know is what you sign up for. But to your point, the one boss in both their lives, that doesn't make that any easier of a conversation.
No, it does not.
Speaking of tough conversations for Doug Peterson, he got to get asked a lot after the game about the injury to Trevor Lawrence, and really ugly one. In the fourth quarter, Dad, it looked really bad. Trevor Lawrence dropping back. He's in the pocket, and Walker Little, his left tackle, gets bull rushed back into Trevor, and he's actually the one that steps on Trevor Lawrence's ankle. Trevor goes down. He tries to get back up and immediately hits the turf again, and you can see he is frustrated, throws his helmet. Yeah. You were looking, and you always say, Dad, athletes know. When something's really wrong, guys tend to know. But this is now the second time in as many weeks. We saw this with Joey Bosa, where he was inconsolable after an injury, and then people were wondering about the severity. And all the indication we got after the game, and we're going to still wait for x-rays and all those other information to come back out, but Adam Schefter and ESPN were reporting after the game that they believe it's an ankle sprain now, which, Dad, makes it sound like something he could potentially come back from, which is not what I thought when I originally saw the injury.
So a lot of times, Mike, and I agree, a lot of times the players know because sometimes it's bad enough where they hear a crack or they hear a pop or they hear something. But I will say it's a little different at times with an ankle injury. Now, it wasn't a normal roll of the ankle, but still, when you sprain that ankle, we've all done it. Athlete, non-athlete, a lot of people have done it. That initial pain is bad, right? When you first sprain that ankle, you think your ankle exploded. You're down grabbing it, writhing around, and then it kind of wears off. So I would imagine everybody is kind of hoping for that it was that kind. He was seen with crutches and a walking boot, which is no matter what, you're going to do that. You're going to isolate that thing. So we'll see. We'll wait till these tests come out.
Well, speaking of walking, the only thing I wanted to say is, where was the cart?
Yeah.
Why didn't they have anything with wheels there? And as everyone pointed out, this is the state of Florida that I have to imagine has more golf carts per capita than any other state in the union. And yet we get these shots of Trevor Lawrence being helped walking down this long-ass hallway to try and get to the x-ray machine or the locker room or wherever he was going in that stadium. I mean, Dad, I feel like I was taking crazy pills at that point. What was going on?
Do you think he was one of those guys? And, there are guys out there that said, I'm not going out in a cart. I'm walking in the locker room. Do not put me on a cart.
I don't think so. I feel like
I don't know.
The cart. It's like the Seinfeld episode. Do you want a chair? Do you want a chair?
Yeah.
I feel like we get you a chair.
Yeah, it did seem pretty odd when he was walking off the field. First, then you thought he was just going to be on the sideline in the blue tent. But then, when he was walking in, looked like a long hallway. Looked like a long hallway he had to head to. I hope our buddy Emerson is okay. I haven't heard from him yet, so I hope he survived. Jesse, you're out there with him. Have we heard from him yet? Do we know anything?
I texted him and I haven't heard back, so I think maybe we should start calling the hospitals.
Yeah,
it's like that.
Or the jails.
It's like the college football meme tweet, the 18-year-olds that play for the school that I like didn't play well enough this weekend, and so now I'm out in the driveway asking my wife to back up the rag 4, saying I don't care if I die tonight. That's where Emerson's arrived at this point.
So at this point, Jacksonville drops to 4th. They're still division leaders with Indy behind them, a loss behind them, and KC jumps to 3. It's still Miami and Baltimore 1 and 2. So they're still there, Jacksonville, but a lot is going to find out. And they said going forward, C.J. Beathard would be the guy. Doug Peterson said he's been around for a while, certainly seen enough of the game, and we'll see how it goes. Again, let me make a bigger question out of this, Mike.
Yeah,
go ahead. Well, mine's going to be a little off topic, so.
Well, my only thing was coming off this, Dad, now as it pertains to the AFC playoff picture you just described is, and I saw Andrew Siciliano tweet this, that if Trevor Lawrence isn't able to go next weekend, 4 of the 7 teams currently situated in the AFC playoff picture are going to be trotting out backup quarterbacks. And when we talk about teams like Buffalo and some of the other teams that have struggled and been on the fringe of this, the Los Angeles Chargers, you can start to look at this and go, all right, what does this mean down the stretch here as teams are trying to execute this? Some of it's going to be, hey, how long is a guy like Trevor Lawrence out? But you look at it right now, Gardner Minshew in for the Indianapolis Colts, who's been there. Joe Flacco or whoever the Browns trot out. C.J. Beathard for the Jags. Mitch Trubisky going in for the injury of Kenny Pickett, the Steelers. And that doesn't even get to the rest of the AFC, Dad. Of the AFC, there are 9 teams that will technically be starting a backup should Trevor Lawrence not be in this next week. With Jake Browning there, Aiden O'Connell in Vegas, whoever, as we'll get to the Jets quarterback situation, trots out for them. Will Levis for the Titans, Bailey Zappi for the Patriots. The ultimate example of a meat grinder that's been this season is on the AFC that was supposed to be the superior conference because you had all these Hall of Fame quarterbacks in it, and now looks like dreck.
Leads me to my question. And this is kind of half tongue-in-cheek but half serious, because why are there so many rules to protect quarterbacks in the NFL? Is to keep them on the field, right, and keep the stars playing so for the viewing public, right? So you keep the best quarterbacks out there, right? So let me ask you this question. You just list off the litany. At one point, I think 2 weekends ago, we were going into the weekend with 50 starting quarterbacks, and we're now surpassing that with more backups that are going to go in and are going to start. If we find out after this year that the ratings did not drop at all, can we start protecting the quarterback less? I mean, we will have proof that you're trying to protect the big-time quarterbacks so people will tune in and watch and go to the games. Games are sold out, and now if ratings stay up with all these backup quarterbacks, can we all of a sudden say, you know what, we will review the roughing the quarterback ridiculously bad calls some of the officials are making, and maybe we'll let them get hit a little bit more because all these backups are in and everybody keeps watching. That's what happens with the NFL. So half-heartedly I'm joking, but half-heartedly I am serious that is there an effect when we get to not just a couple backups, we have tons of backup quarterbacks in.
Listen, I'm not a television executive by any means, and I will say for the note, because I got this pointed out to me last night, Trevor Lawrence was injured after getting stepped on by his own guy, but I agree with the sentiment that they're going to see that and they're still going to have their interest in protecting the quarterback there. I will be curious. I do think there's going to be some sort of hit, because even anecdotally for me, Dad, there's been a lot of windows now where I don't even bother watching the red zone. No disrespect to friend of the program, Scott Hansen. I'll put him on in the background just to support ratings-wise there. But a lot of times when the other games are that bad, I've used the last couple of weekends to just watch the one good game on in that window. That's what I've been driven to by all of this, because I look at these teams and go, all right, well, how much can I realistically expect from this as we've got backup quarterback going out there and trying to duke it out? It's no disrespect to those guys. Live out your dream. But I absolutely think we could see an effect on this. And as always, it's relative to the NFL's own monster standard, not to the rest of television.
Yeah, that is very true. I agree with that. We will see. But I say let's protect the quarterbacks less. That's my vote.
And I say let's find out who the hell the quarterback's going to be for the Jets next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Let's talk about the Jets' quarterback struggles because there has been a development, as there always seems to be. So according to a report by Zach Rosenblatt and Diana Rossini of The Athletic, the Jets want to go back to Zach Wilson this week against the Texans, but Wilson is not interested. So they basically said they're prepared to make another switch at QB. The team is leaning towards turning back to Zach Wilson, but apparently he is reluctant. He is hesitant to take this opportunity. And there's been such intense speculation about this that Robert Saleh actually had to address the situation.
If he was reluctant to play, guys, he wouldn't be here. All right. I actually, coincidentally, just got done speaking with him. He came in about a half hour ago, and we had a really good conversation. The young man wants the ball. He wants to start. He believes he's the best quarterback in the room and best quarterback for this team and the guy who gives us the best chance to win. And I'll tell you guys the same thing I told him. I appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that he wants to play. I'm just not there yet.
What do you guys think the truth is here? Because these are respected journalists. They're not just going to pull this out of nothing. And then you got Robert Saleh completely refuting the report. So truth probably somewhere in the middle, right?
I think the truth is that the Jets have to be... This has to be one of the most mismanaged quarterback situations I've seen in I don't know how long from top to bottom. I said this yesterday on Twitter, and I stand by this. You have to be born a Jets fan. Because if any sane person chooses willingly to go and follow this team and to court this kind of chaos every week of their life, I want them to get serious help. There's no way you choose that. You have to be born in this. Dad, this organization continues to reinvent different ways to seem inept and find new lows. And post Aaron Rodgers injury, which is a curveball that obviously nobody wants to anticipate going into the season, but every step of the way after that, their response to this has been utter nonsense.
It has. And, people have said, why didn't they get anybody right away? And then Josh Dobbs starts playing well in Minnesota. Said you could have had Josh Dobbs, but that's come down to earth. Then Joe Flacco comes out firing in Cleveland, but they end up losing the game. So everybody's saying maybe they should have got Joe Flacco. And who knows if anybody would have helped. But the thought process was do something. Try something. Show the guys in that locker room or everybody that you're trying something by bringing a veteran in to see what they could do, and maybe they would have done better. Now, as far as the situation, Mike, it's very difficult for my little brain to comprehend that a player playing in the NFL would not want to walk on the field, especially one that is playing bad and knows, and listen, he's not going to be there next year, but you know what he wants to continue to do? Play football. So what have you done for me lately? Is that what he wants out there? Is that what he wants as other teams are looking to get him? Or would he rather get back on the field and try and show that he could do? They have some weapons out there. The O-line's hurting. I know it's difficult, but Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, we like them to do something on offense. But wouldn't you want to get back out there and try and put a better foot forward for knowing, because players know more than anybody else, that you're auditioning now for another team. You're not going to be on this team next year. So it's just difficult for me to comprehend that a player would say no, especially a player like this, who's really playing for the only reason he's going to have a quarterbacking future in the NFL is because he was one of the top picks. They go on a lot of times forever to be backups because they were a top pick. So I have a hard time believing it. Obviously, I'm not there. This is just my opinion that a player with still something to look forward to, I'm sure he feels in his career, the best way to show that is to get back on the field and say, I'm not as bad as what you're seeing out here. I can be better. Other 31 teams out there if you're looking.
It apparently got to the point, according to Diana Rossini at The Athletic, that Aaron Rodgers reportedly reached out to Zach Wilson in an effort to advise him to resume the starting role. But at the time, Wilson remained apprehensive due to the perceived injury risk, according to sources. And the timeline of events that, again, Diana lays out is that Zach Wilson made clear to multiple members of the organization, player, staff, and coaches of his apprehension to start due to the perceived injury risk. And, Dad, I'm with you in terms of the opportunity here, 100%. You're looking around the NFL right now. We just talked about all the backup quarterbacks out there. Yeah. This is everybody re-upping their certification to be a backup. When you look around in a decade and you see some of these same names holding clipboards on sidelines in the league, you're going to trace it back to this season where they had to go out there. I used to joke about this with Chase Daniel. Every once in a while, you got to go out into a game and throw a few passes. Show them you can still spot it, spot duty here and there, and then be great vibes on the sideline, be a great presence in the locker room and meeting room, acquire currency, pass go, collect $200. It's a great gig. You should want to keep doing it. But, Dad, this in principle, what you were describing there, sounds like what we talk about every year when we get to college bowl season. There are the haves and there are the have-nots. Right? Going into bowl season, we're going to talk about Caleb Williams, who it sounds like, according to his head coach, Lincoln Riley, is going to sit out their bowl game. And we all expected that because Caleb Williams, despite the opportunities there for him in college, is probably, despite what we've heard from him, going to go to the NFL, going to be either the first or second pick in the draft, and going to make a boatload of guaranteed money there and live out all of his future dreams of being an NFL quarterback. He doesn't need this bowl game. But for the rest of the guys playing college football, like the me's of the world, you need every bit of tape that you can get. And so whether you like the bowl game or not doesn't matter. Bowl games are the sum total of where you're going and how much time you have curfew-free early in the week to go out and drink in a new place. The rest of it is, hey, we got a game to play. We're football players. If I want to play at the next level, I need to probably go out there and ball for this game. That's the lot in life for the vast majority of us who sign up to play that sport. Zach Wilson is the NFL equivalent of that right now. He's not someone that can say, well, I'm going to be here no matter what, and so I can focus more on my health. If Justin Jefferson, Dad, and the Minnesota Vikings looked at their season trajectory and said, you know what? I'm going to be here. I'm going to be a massive contract guy for us. If I want to slow my rehab down a little bit because I'm worried about the long-term future of this, sure. Aaron Rodgers in the Jets room. We've been talking about this for weeks with him. Absolutely. If you're Zach Wilson here, no. Like, you got to be out on the field. If there's any truth to this thought process there, you can understand it maybe in a weak moment, Dad. And I think Rob Saleh said as much when he went on the Michael Kay show. As empathetically, I can understand that. But once your cooler head prevails, it's got to be that understanding. If my goal is to keep playing football, I need to be out there trying to show people that I'm better than what I've put on tape so far.
And what you said in the big picture there is 1,000% correct. You know, back when I was in college, nobody was skipping games, you know, getting ready for the NFL. We all played them. But in my position as well, if I were playing today, I would have played in the bowl game. I would have wanted to continue to put tape in front of the NFL. And you're right, that's 99% of the players that are out there. But for the Caleb Williams, the Brock Bowers, who has been injured anyway and still would have a couple of weeks before he would play, you could even say was healthy, but why would he go out there? And I don't know if he's not playing yet, but I don't know why he would go out there. For Zach Wilson, not only from the physical part of playing, if in fact this was true that he didn't want to go out there, if I'm another team, I'm saying, wait a minute. This guy needs to show something, and he didn't want to go on the field to show it. So that would do something to me as well, to say, you know, that guy's not going to be on my team. So I think there's that part of it as well. Bottom line is, dude, get out on the field if you have the chance, compete, and try and put a better product out there for the next team.
And this does make you wonder, like, who benefits from every time a story like this comes out. I always think, which side benefits from this news being out there? Because it's certainly not Zach Wilson, right? There's no way that he's the one that's leaking this to anybody, because it obviously would make him look terrible. And so you look at the organization, and if for whatever reason they were really having trouble getting him back on the field, because we saw they went through the Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle combination, and surprise, surprise, it wasn't great, because all the options that you had at this point, like you said, Dad, even if you've gone out and got them, weren't going to be great options at this point. And so if they were having some trouble getting Zach Wilson back on the field, this is the type of information you would leak out to the public to put that kind of pressure on him. So it seems like that would be the source, but then that would mean at the core of this that there was some issue or some discrepancy of Zach Wilson going back out and starting for you or not, which doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, not sure which direction this is, just going by the reports right now. But if he has a chance to be the starter, I would hope he would grab hold of that and go back out on the field.
I would be. So now we'll all be locked into the next Zach Wilson media appearance and the Jets' decision for this weekend. Coming up next, though, big decisions got made for which college players will head to New York for the Heisman ceremony.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. The votes are in. Here's a look at your Heisman Trophy finalists announced last night with DK Sportsbook odds to win. So LSU's Jaden Daniels, Oregon's Bo Nix, Washington's Michael Penix Jr., then Ohio State receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. Look at that. All right, so GoJo, you cast your vote for this. You don't have to reveal it, but take us through your process.
Or reveal it. Or tell us exactly who you voted for.
Too.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, guys? I'm not allowed to do that because as a valued part of the Heisman voting community, we are not able to reveal our votes until after the award is announced this upcoming weekend. So you guys are all going to have to wait. I release my ballot every year after the fact for full transparency because I care about this process very deeply. But no, it is fun. I mean, in all seriousness, it is cool and patently absurd that I get to say I'm a Heisman voter. I've got friends who I think I respect much more in the media who are able to do this. But Dad, like anything else, it's a great opportunity to just watch an absolute buttload of football. And coming off this last weekend, all these guys are names that we're familiar with, right? When you look at these players, none of them are a surprising addition to this, all incredibly deserving, and all were a huge part of the reason their team was anywhere, right? Like you look at Marvin Harrison Jr. as the perfect example of that, the only non-quarterback being invited to New York. And the Ohio State Buckeyes, whose quarterback just entered the portal because he saw it's probably not going to be long for him around there in Ohio State. If there's no Marvin Harrison Jr. on that team, they're not beating Penn State. If there's no Marvin Harrison Jr. on that team, they're not in the game against Michigan. He was a one-man wrecking crew in a room that had so many talented guys at receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr. was absolutely the straw that stirred the drink for that team. So you see things like that. Ever since Michael Penix came over, the combination of him and Kalen DeBoer in Washington has made that team a 2-year jumpstart that now has them in the college football playoff. Jaden Daniels Ben's defenses in a way you rarely ever see has been the biggest dual threat in college football. And then Bo Nix, outside of Washington, has been sensational this season. Oregon had a Washington problem, but they had a Bo Nix solution to everything else. So I think this is an incredibly deserving final group, Dad, and it's going to be a really tightly contested race this year.
And we know you look at stats a lot, and certainly where the team ends up, and the Washington Penix's team ended up going the furthest as they're going to be in the playoffs. You look at their stats in the country. Yards passing, Penix 1, Nix 2, and Daniels 3. Touchdown passes, Daniels and Bo Nix tied for first at 40, and then third is Penix. So these three are the top three, even statistically, because we talked about, as you did, Marvin Harrison statistically is not the top wide receiver, but what he meant to that team is ridiculous. But these are statistically the top three quarterbacks. So it will be interesting to find out when we can hear what your vote is and what other voted. Did you vote, kind of like the committee? How many different areas do you go to? Do you go to the stats? Do you go to interceptions? Of which interceptions it was, I think Bo Nix had the least in this one at 3, and Daniels 4, and Penix 9. I think it was 9. Do you look at that? Do you look at how far they took their team? As I said, Penix took his team to the finals. So what are some of, as I said, you can't give us who you picked, but your criteria, just like if you were on the committee, your criteria that you looked at in fixing your vote?
Yeah, how much does your performance matter to your team's overall outcome, right? Like, how big a part of winning are you? Because you can see gaudy stats for a lot of players that are ultimately window dressing or benefiting from another player's gravity or an importance to the team, and you're the one that has to go out there and make the plays, and there's no shame in being that guy and doing it, but we also see, Dad, players that are the foundation for an entire offense. Another player that I have to imagine, if people release their ballots, was probably pretty close in this conversation was a guy like Ollie Gordon, the running back for Oklahoma State. When you turn on Oklahoma State football, what do you see? An offense that's largely predicated on running the ball and then RPO passes. All of it's built on, we have a credible enough run threat for defenses to have to account for, so our quarterback can try and sling the rock to the outside to a lot of these receivers and make throws based off that. And so when you look and see, all right, able to do that, able to, in the open field, be one of the most elusive runners in college football, score a ton of touchdowns, be a part of the games where things go well for them, usually being a reason why, is kind of where I go. So the stats are like a good place to start. It gives you a baseline of, all right, this guy's productive enough to probably be considered for this. But then that next layer is when you go, does the tape match what you're seeing there statistically, and does it point towards the direction of winning? While none of us like the idea that it would just be the best quarterback on the best team award. And certainly this year, Michael Penix Jr., the only one of these guys actually in the college football playoff amongst this group. And so you're not going to get that in earnest. But, Dad, I think there does still need to be something to the fact that your performance is impactful enough to where your team is getting to a place they otherwise wouldn't have.
So, I mean, in that case, in my opinion anyway, Jaden Daniels is going to win this thing because we talked about his passing stats. He also rushed for 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. I mean, and outside of Malik Neighbors, the wide receiver, who was, what do you have, over 1,500 yards receiving or something like that, 1,400 yards, incredible. The surrounding cast for Bo Nix and Penix is better, right? So it would take more from your quarterback like a Jaden Daniels to take his team further. And they didn't go as far as Oregon or Washington. But to that piece of criteria, which is one of more than a few criterias, I think that would go in favor of Daniels. What else is interesting, and this is just where we are today. Last year's winner, Caleb Williams, was a transfer. 2019, Joe Burrow was a transfer. 18, Kyler Murray was a transfer. 17, Baker Mayfield was a transfer. 2010, Cam Newton was a transfer. Oh, by the way, all the way back to 1945, Doc Blanchard from Army was a transfer from North Carolina. So it's kind of fun just to throw that in there. But yeah, I know. How about it? So it started way back then, right? So, I mean, you're seeing this more and more. These three quarterbacks, Marvin Harrison Jr. is the only one not a transfer here. And one of these quarterbacks, I think, is going to win it. So it's going to be another year of a transferred quarterback winning a Heisman. Again, that's just where we are. When we talk about November 26th, when the portal opened, there were 1,100 players that jumped into it. I mean, it's crazy where we are in college football right now. But the bottom line is that's where we are right now, and you just have to find a way and work with it.
Well, I think you look at all of these guys too, and Michael Penix is a great example of what we talked about as a huge positive for the portal is when your coaching situation changes drastically, how you're able to respond. Michael Penix Jr. had his best season when Kalen DeBoer was with him at Indiana. Right. So then DeBoer goes out to Fresno State and then makes the jump up there to Washington. And now you're like, oh, this is a great opportunity to finish my career with somebody that I know, with a familiar voice, and now has done it multiple years there, right? That's the other thing you can say for these guys is it's now, once they made that choice, been multiple seasons at the same spot. They found the right fit. They found the right voice in their ear. They found the right supporting cast, and they decided to stick around long enough to see the best version of themselves finally come into fruition. And that's kind of been the cool part for all these guys. You mentioned Joe Burrow was the same way. We always think of it as that 2019 season, but in actuality, Joe Burrow had another year as a starter at LSU where it didn't look as good and came back and then had the supernova season and everything changed. So there are a lot of really compelling stories with all of these guys, very different players, which is the cool part too. Totally different flavors of ice cream in this entire group. But yes, the backstories for a lot of them very similar, like you said.
And you mentioned that with Penix and following his coach, and we're going to see that because there's we'll talk about it, a ton of quarterbacks in the portal, and some are going to follow their coach that left. And there are those that say they shouldn't be able to do that. And my response is, why? They got for most part got recruited by this coach, went to school. You want to sit there and say they went to school because of the school, great. I'm sure that was part of it, but it's also because of the coach that they're going there. And that coach has the freedom to leave. He has the freedom to, or the option, I should say, to buy out his contract and go somewhere else. Why shouldn't the player get to as well? Why shouldn't the player get to say, you know what, this guy recruited me, he left, and I came here basically for him, I'm following him. That's why I have no problem with these guys if they want, especially if their coach leaves, if they want to follow their coach, if their coach wants them.
Yeah, I do think it is interesting that, like, very antiquated, and it felt antiquated as a notion when I was getting recruited in 2007, 2008, in that range of, hey, you're just committing to the place or you're committing to the school, like I was, because I loved Notre Dame, and I think for the most part, Charlie Weiss was the one that gave me the scholarship. I'm forever indebted, but I'd imagine there would have been a lot of coaches I would have gone to Notre Dame and played for. I don't know how prevalent that was for others back then, and I certainly don't know how prevalent that idea is now.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. So, guys, the 30-day winter transfer portal opened yesterday in college football, and we've had some big names entering it. Probably the biggest name to enter the portal, Oklahoma starting QB Dillon Gabriel. Now, he penned a goodbye, actually, to Sooner Nation on Twitter, feeling pretty final here when you say the kind of stuff he said. He enjoyed his time. He wants to thank Sooner Nation, etc. So feels pretty final. He led the Sooners to a 16-8 record in his starts over 2 seasons, 55 touchdown passes, 12 picks. He was 6th in total passing yards among all quarterbacks this season. He has one more season of eligibility, guys. So how surprised were you by this news?
I'm not surprised by anyone hopping into the portal at this point. That just seems to be the parlance of our time. Like, this is what you do. And we'll see, Dad, whether it's, the way you actually explore free agency, if this is so that guys can negotiate. And we know that there's a pretty robust market for name, image, and likeness payments to get guys, especially at this position, to different schools, or if it's motivated by a lot of the same things that have been there. And in Dillon's case, his offensive coordinator, Jeff Lebby, is now taking the head coaching job at Mississippi State. And so you do wonder, as most people, I think now, when you see a coach make a move and you see him come from a place that had quality parts anywhere on that roster, quarterback or otherwise, your first inclination is, I wonder if they're going to follow and do the easy thing here to help ease that transition process. Because like we saw for Lincoln Riley going from Oklahoma to Southern California, that transition to SC got made a lot easier by the fact that a super talented guy named Caleb Williams wanted to come out and follow you to Los Angeles.
So I think there are different reasons for different things, right? And it's what I just talked about. Lebby was with him at UCF with Gabriel, and Lebby comes to Oklahoma, and Gabriel comes there, and now don't be shocked if he ends up. To me, don't be shocked if he ends up at Mississippi State, and that's always an interesting one to me when starting quarterbacks leave as well, because you have Kyle McCord who left from Ohio State as a starting quarterback as well. Cameron Ward, Washington State. But I could see kind of Washington State and Oregon State. They're kind of left out in the cold. They're going to play more of a Mountain West schedule right now. So I understand that one a little more. But I wonder now, because normally people stayed, but now we're getting into the portal time, and a lot of times it had been backups that transferred, and how much are they actually wooed by the current coaching staff? No, stay, but they want to go play somewhere else. But how about and I don't just mean starting quarterbacks. There are starting O linemen, starting D linemen that are transferring, and you wonder now what the reason is. Do I want to go to a better system that fits me to play in the NFL? Are coaches now sitting down with guys and saying, you know what? Wouldn't be in best interest for you to maybe leave. And I would be fine with that. If you guys were in that era and a coach said that to you, I would want the coach, and I would imagine a player. Now, it would sting because we all have pride, but instead of, trying to stay there, though, the old school, stay and compete. You never know when you're going to be on the field. Okay, I get it, whatever. But for the most part, if you get a coach saying, listen, there are other guys ahead of you, it may not happen here, or even though you were a starter, we're going to start to lean this way, I would appreciate the honesty because of the ease now to kind of move on. So every situation is different on how it's presented for players that end up entering the portal.
Well, and Dad, what you just described is what we saw Deion Sanders do this spring very publicly, right? The way he talked about managing that roster pre and post the spring football game, where he made it clear to a bunch of guys, you're not going to be here when we kick off for summer workouts, and certainly not when we kick off to the fall. Deion Sanders also, did you see him on the Levitard show yesterday, Dad, talking about it's portal day and I'm getting linemen? Like, he's not being coy about any of this. And so maybe we can use that as somewhat instructive. You're right of, hey, you know what, if you're a coach, and I've thought about this a lot, Dad, in the portal era, because people have talked about how difficult it is to be a coach and build a roster right now when you've got the potential for influx like this every single season, is I do think ultimately, while it might seem callous to some, it does benefit you to clearly state your intentions. Because we know, like anything else, Dad, what was always the number one thing when you talked about people in recruiting? The number one recruiting tool for most colleges is still, and most anything is still, word of mouth. You can put up branding everywhere. You can sell people the dream in all the other ways in the recruiting process. But ultimately, players are going to talk. People are going to talk behind closed doors. I learned more on recruiting trips, talking to the current guys on teams and in locker rooms, and tried to do the same for players that were visiting us than you were going to learn talking to any coach. Because at the end of the day, they're still trying to sell you something, even as much as some of them might deal with you honestly, some more than others. And so that word of mouth is always going to be, hey, the coach shoots you straight here. They're not going to try and tell you one thing and keep you on the roster to fill out the back end or just be their depth guy or something like that. They're actually going to help you. Mac Brown, I remember talking to him about this a couple of years ago before a bowl game, said, hey, if there's a guy that doesn't want to be here anymore, we're going to try and help him get to where he wants to go next. And while Mac says, that's because of the promise we make them when we're recruiting them, I also think that's just good business at this point, Dad.
Listen, I agree with you. And as I said, every situation can be different. And as straight up as people are now, I think the better off. Or sometimes, Mike, you just get a player that maybe wasn't heavily recruited and has a big year and says, you know what, I can do this somewhere else. I'll give you a name. And I don't think a lot of people will know the name. The tight end for UConn, Justin Jolly. Okay? 2 years at UConn. He had, I think, 18 catches last year. This year, he led UConn in receptions with 56 for 578 yards, and he was one of the bright spots for UConn, who had a 3-9 season. UConn is not a football school. That has fallen off. They are basically done being showing any kind of power in football. This guy had a big year.
Jim Moore Jr. the last couple of years got him to a bowl game last year.
Agree.
He's got it moving in the right direction, but it's not what it used to be when they were in the Big East. There's no doubt.
So to my point, you get a player who was a bright spot on the team. One of the games they played was against Tennessee, where he caught 8 passes for 89 yards. he went in the portal, and he already said on social media that he's been offered by Tennessee. So he gets, because of the year he had, to make a jump from UConn to Tennessee, and that's a jump, right? As much as Jim Moore Jr. is helping that program, and God knows it needed it to help get them in the right direction, Tennessee is a huge, huge upgrade for this guy who wants to take the step to the, a big-time Power 5 team and a big-time Power 5 conference to see what he can do. So you'll get players like that as well.
Yeah, and college football has always had that, right? And I think that there's been years where we've seen that from the FCS level to the FBS level, where people have made those kind of moves that, yeah, absolutely give you the opportunity for added exposure. Certainly at this point, income a very real part of this conversation as well, and that big school experience that maybe some of these guys are looking for. That's what I mean. In all of this, dollars and cents is going to be the thing that governs most of this, I'd imagine. But there are still some of the other things that factor in. And you're right now, Dad, it is even more difficult for the schools that are outside of that Power 5, Power 2 crust that we've talked about, really at the top of the sport, to feel like, all right, I'm developing my guy and always at risk of them coming in and getting poached. We saw this from Dave Clawson, who kind of lamented this after the Notre Dame-Wake Forest game, saying, how can Notre Dame love him? We developed him. We had him around there. We love him. You guys rented him for a semester. And it's that feeling of, hey, we spend all this time helping and trying to create this great player only to watch them go away and use the end of that or use the best version of that somewhere else. I don't discount that it's incredibly frustrating, but I think a version of that has always been in the sport, even without the money, because certain schools and scrutiny opportunities, like you just mentioned, present more for a player who's not guaranteed anything beyond college either. That could be the best opportunity that UConn tight end has to maximize his 5 years, exposure-wise, financially, all the above.
Think about, too, what we talked about before the season. The Pac-12 probably had the deepest quarterbacks in the country, right? And while the Pac-12 is going away, let's just look at those teams, whether they're moving, most to the Big Ten or a couple to the ACC. You got Caleb Williams is going to be gone. You got Penix is going to be gone. Bo Nix is going to be gone. We just talked about Cameron Ward transferring out of Washington State. DJ is leaving Oregon State as well. So that's going to look all different. Those teams, again, not the Pac-12 because the Pac-12 is done, but those teams are going to look different with the quarterbacks that are going to be out. And what was the deepest conference of quarterbacks?
And, good luck during bowl season trying to keep track of all of this, by the way. We know the opt-outs have always been the things that people have pointed to here. Bowl season, basically, spring football part 1 now. Get used to knowing the names of some of your young guys that might play a role for you going forward or might have their jobs supplanted by great transfer players that you're able to get at some point in this process here. We'll figure it out as we go. We'll get to NFL superlatives coming up next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We have got NFL superlatives coming up here very shortly, week 13, as we take a look back at what we've got before we start to look ahead to the upcoming weekend. But Dad, I did think it was interesting. We were talking in the last segment about the college football transfer portal and the fact that we've already got over 1,000 players officially entered into the transfer portal on Monday. And that's when the window opened, right? When you look at the transfer portal right now, the CFP, the transfer portal opened December 4th and goes until January 2nd this time around. There's also the window in the spring there. And Jesse accurately pointed out that this looked like boy math given the sheer volume of players that were already in the portal. And it's a good time to remind everybody there were already some names in there because of another rule that exists in college sports where if your coach leaves, is either fired or takes a different job, the transfer portal opens immediately for the players on that team. It's a bit of added protection for guys that are subject to coaching changes. And so that's why the boy math is boy math and its ass off in this situation, Dad, because, and this is the part of it where people malign this rule or lament how college football has changed. This is the part of it that I enjoy the most, is because it is added protection for something that for so long players had no ability to combat. You were buying a bill of goods that you were sold, and then all of a sudden when that changed, you had no recourse to get out of there if you weren't a graduate student.
Yeah, you just wonder, too, when coaches nowadays, when coaches are taking another job, do they pull their star players over aside and say, hey, you know, I'm heading over to this school, you know, feel free, you know, let me hold that portal door open for you as you step through. So yeah, and we keep talking about the NFL, 4 to 7 head coaching jobs available every year. The amount in college is huge, and we only usually hear about the big jobs in college, but there are a lot of jobs in college that change every year. So there's 85 scholarships per team, and every one of them can transfer for a coach that leaves. So Jesse, there you go. That's why this number is so big right now. That November 26th, a whole lot of players who lost their coach jumped into the portal.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I was very confused. So thank you for clarifying, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
You know what? And I'm sure you are not alone in that, because this is all a brave new world. Like every year, we are in an information gathering mode in college football right now. So much has changed all at once. We're still learning about this process. It's still evolving and changing. And the next item on that frontier is no doubt going to be bowl season. But the next item on our to-do list is week 13 in the NFL in the rearview mirror. We've got superlatives from this last weekend, Dad. And let's start with this one and really kind of use it as a springboard to Coach of the Year, because our Coach of the Week, who got the most attention from Week 13, this idea was spurred, all credit to Mina Kimes and her podcast, for giving some love to a guy in Shane Steichen, who's probably not going to win Coach of the Year, but has done an exemplary job with a Colts team that seems to be in playoff position right now, mostly because, and I thought about this yesterday, Dad, remember that Travis Hunter quote? Unfortunately, the Florida State quarterback who broke his leg and was injured for the last 2 games as Florida State left on the outside looking into the college football playoff. He said, I wish I had broken my leg earlier so that the committee and the nation could have seen how deep the rest of this roster was, how great the rest of this team was. Anthony Richardson getting hurt as early as he did allow this Colts team to adjust a lot faster than some of its AFC counterparts, who are having to trot out backups now at this point in the season and having to adjust in November and December, as opposed to the Colts, who are now running an offense that Gardner Minshew is tailored to him and have made that switch at a time that allows them to, I think, be in as good a position as you could hope for one of the 9 teams in the AFC potentially trotting out backups to actually make a playoff push down the stretch here and hold your spot in this dance.
Yeah, it's been impressive because other people we want to talk. Matt LaFleur, D'Amico Ryans, who I think is going to be the Coach of the Year. I mean, for what he's doing with Houston. Shane Steichen's the only one doing it right now with the backup quarterback out of those. If I'm going to lean toward who got my attention this week, I might lean toward Matt LaFleur. So Green Bay, you know, there was a while they were like, is Love going to be the right guy? Right? Is this going to be our guy? Now he is playing incredibly well. They're making a playoff push without question in the NFC North, and that's going to be their quarterback. What Shane Steichen is doing with Gardner is fantastic, but we know the job's going back to Anthony Richardson. So which may, in all honesty, may make it even more impressive that they're doing it with a backup. But it would be a rookie right now, so who knows if it would be any better, as a rookie quarterback with growing pains. Knowing that you're getting Love going in the right direction now, where I think they all are exhaling in Green Bay saying, okay, we don't have to go look for a quarterback and kind of start this process over again. We can continue on. And the team they beat in Kansas City, I think that was a monster week for LaFleur, for Jordan, and for Green Bay.
Yeah, it's a measuring stick opponent, right? We all have this when you get ready to call a game or something, Dad. Usually, and I do this for college all the time, I want to see what a team looked like when they played against a known commodity, right? A team who we believe is going to be someone who's there at the end or someone who you at least trust the way they're built. Kansas City's one of those teams where they might not be the best version of themselves right now, but that's a grown-up football team. Great coach, Hall of Fame quarterback, top 5 defense in the NFL right now, and you're absolutely right. Matt LaFleur has had these guys ready, and remember, it's a young group. They lost David Bakhtiari on that offensive line very early in this season for the rest of the year and have had to shuffle parts around that group. They didn't have Christian Watson fully healthy for the first portion of the season. And all Matt LaFleur has done is not only help his quarterback continue to acclimate to this process and look like the future answer there, but keep the momentum going from last year from a young group of skill players that kind of got trial by fire, were the subject of a lot of ire, and now appear to be part of the solution on that team. So you're absolutely right. Matt LaFleur deserves a ton of credit for the job that he's done with the Green Bay Packers. Let's get to this week's Save the Date, Dad. Which team needed the win the most, whether they got it or not? And speaking of the Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love made no bones about it. A guy who got his first ever NFL start against the Kansas City Chiefs on the road said this one he had been looking forward to for a long time.
Yeah, it's huge. For me personally, it's just obviously I've had this game, circled for a long time. It's my first start. Obviously didn't play how I wanted to the first game, so being able to see these guys again and get the victory is huge. It was just a great team win tonight. Everybody just balled out.
And, Dad, you can certainly understand that from a personal standpoint for him. For everything we talked about as a checkup for the Packers, it was also a huge feather in the cap of Jordan Love for his progress as a player. Spags blitzed the ever-loving hell out of him in that first matchup because he was a rookie going in for Aaron Rodgers. And now this time around, he's a much more mature player who had answers for the things that came his way. And while there is part of that, I don't think he necessarily needed it. We talked going into the weekend. The 49ers, that felt cathartic. Yeah, it wasn't revenge, but that was still something that mattered a lot to that team given the backdrop of last year's NFC Championship and what their goals are this year. The 49ers have always been the bridesmaid. They haven't gotten to be the bride yet under Kyle Shanahan. He carries that boogeyman from his days back with the Atlanta Falcons too. And so I'd imagine for them, this is all about continuing to sharpen the sword in effort of finally getting over the line and winning the Super Bowl in a year where it looks laid out for them right now. I'd have to imagine the 49ers are the overwhelming favorite at this point in the NFL calendar, and deservedly so, because when fully healthy, they are absolutely a weapon of mass destruction.
So right now, you're trying to position for the number 1 seed. Philly still has that in the conference as they go to Dallas this week, a game I'm really looking forward to calling. Other games, I would look at the San Francisco game. Again, it's not a revenge game, but in a private moment for those players in the locker room, I think amongst themselves, they're going to say, see, we know we're better than they are. Or we believe and we show we think we're better than they are. And then I think the Lions getting back, that one surprised us with the loss, but maybe not so much because they lost to Green Bay on Thanksgiving, who is on a bit of a run now.
Right.
But getting back in the win column was big. But I'm still going with Green Bay on this one. For who needed the win at home against Kansas City. And as you said, I agree, not the Kansas City we're used to, but still, that's Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes. And they beat him, and they look better, and Jordan Love is growing. And as we talked about, the youngest wide receiver tight ends in the league. So, it's all going up, arrow up for them as they continue on, and they're continuing on and growing together and winning now at the same time.
By the way, if you're circling the gotta have it game for the weekend coming up in week 14, you need look no further, as we've talked a lot, whispered about on the show a little bit today, the AFC playoff picture. Buffalo at Kansas City. feels like a loser leaves town match in a lot of ways. Not that the Chiefs are at risk of missing the playoffs or anything like that, but we know Patrick Mahomes, no road playoff games, right? This has been a one-way ticket to home field advantage for the Chiefs every season that they've made these postseason runs. It's been Arrowhead. We had the Burrowhead saga, all that stuff go on in the past, but that's because they've been there, and right now that looks like they're, on their side, a bit of a tenuous grasp on that. And on the Bills side, Dad, you got to see an opportunity with all these injuries right now. Turnovers snake bit you. You're still an incredibly potent offense. Your defense has certainly been decaying physically, and so there's that to worry about and contend with. But that game is going to be one that falls into this line of, hey, circle it on the calendar, because if Buffalo's going to make a run, it's going to have to start with beating a vulnerable Kansas City team, or I should say as vulnerable a Kansas City team as we've seen in quite some time. Get on my back award, Dad. The player that's the key to a team's playoff push upcoming here, and there's a bunch of interesting names there. We've mentioned Kyren Williams a couple of times on this show because he's a Notre Dame guy. 316 total yards in the last 2 games. He's been sensational for a Rams team. By no means out of it. Going to have an interesting test coming up this weekend too, but I just think the job that Nico Collins did, Tank Dell going down in that Texans game, is a massive blow to that team. They've been an incredible 1-2 punch. We've talked about the holistic approach that the Texans took to revamping that franchise this offseason, exercising some of the demons from the front office and guys like Jack Easterby last year. Obviously, the D'Amico Ryans hire, but you've had an offensive line able to protect CJ and wide receivers capable of getting open. And when Tank Dell went down, Nico Collins just kept doing the damn thing to the tune of 9 for 191 and a touchdown. Yeah,
listen, there are other players out there that are going to have to be relied on. Isaiah Pacheco, for the running attack. But they still have enough other weapons, obviously, with Travis Kelce, and we'll see. We keep asking which wide receiver steps up, and you have Patrick Mahomes. Gardner Minshew, I think, is another one. What he has been doing, and they're in the playoffs right now, I would put him probably second to Nico Collins. Because now Nico Collins, the next closest in receptions is about 20 behind. That's Dalton Schultz, the tight end. So it is going to fall on Nico. And it could affect this team because this team doesn't run well. They average, I think, about 3.7 a rush. So they haven't been really getting off running the ball. It's been Stroud and the combination of Collins, Dell, and Schultz. And now you lose a big part of that. That's really, I think, going to hurt them. So I do think a lot is going to more is going to fall on Nico Collins. And, oh, by the way, everybody they play is going to know that as well.
Yes, absolutely. So all of them going to have him circled there. One more, and I want to give a shout out to Benjamin Solak, who does a great job over at The Ringer, but also writes his hot read column every week for that website as well. And Sam Laporta, the rookie for the Detroit Lions, their tight end, right now is on pace for over 900 receiving yards, which would be the second best among all rookie tight ends, and not far from Kyle Pitts, who's got the all-time receiving record for a rookie tight end with 1,026 yards. So very much within range there, Dad. We talked about this was a pretty stacked tight end class. Our guy Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, the Las Vegas Raiders since Antonio Pierce took over, finally remembered he existed and you can throw him the football. Dalton Kincaid for the Buffalo Bills was their first-round pick, and so there's been a bunch of these guys, but Sam Laporta, as of late, as advertised, for a team that let TJ Hawkinson walk into the division over to the Minnesota Vikings, needed to hit on that and absolutely did. Dad, let's give some love to a team that might be forgotten, or a player that might be forgotten given the season. Those guys are all going to have their day in the sun because they're on teams that are going to be contending for the playoffs. Let's get to the don't you forget about me. The best player on a team that's under 500 right now. Yeah. And
easy.
Dad, this seems like the Mike Evans special. He extended his own record for consecutive 1,000-yard receivings in the NFL to 10. I thought a lot about this, Dad, when you look at the list of quarterbacks outside of Tom Brady that have thrown him the football over the years. It's not quite DeAndre Hopkins with the Houston Texans because Jameis Winston is a talented quarterback. He was able to push the ball downfield, but it's definitely an adventure, and more of an adventure than you would expect for a guy with this kind of career resume point that we just mentioned.
Mike, you mentioned 10 years at 1,000 yards. You know how many years he's been in the league? 10. He's been doing this since his rookie year. Since his rookie year, which he had 1,051 yards, he has been over 1,000 yards. He has 91 touchdowns, basically at least 9 touchdowns a year. The dude is incredible. I mean, he just keeps going and going. A big guy, you can count on him to get the reception, get the yards. For his career, he's averaging almost 15 and a half yards a catch. So it's not a guy who's just catching the short ball, and getting 8-9 yards. I mean, it is amazing what he is doing, the career that he has had, that I am with you. Not a lot of people recognize at times. It's kind of oh, yeah, look what the hell Mike Evans is doing. Wow. And it is wow.
It is. And I mean, the guy, I know wide receiver is a crowded position and it tends to take a while. Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer. Like, he's going to
I agree.
Should be in there at some point.
Yes.
It's just, with that position in particular, it takes so long for that to happen. We kind of saw that with T.O., even though that was a little complicated by some other things. But in some very rarefied air is Mike Evans. He was one of the most frustrating parts for me of that Johnny Manziel Untold documentary, when they were talking about the Texas A&M teams that Manziel was on and talking about how, oh man, look at all this stuff Johnny did. I was like, they had some dudes on that team. Why are we just ignoring all of the talented players that happen to be on that Texas A&M team, Mike Evans included? So congratulations to him on an incredible career milestone. Dad, let's avert our eyes for one last superlative here. This got to be the Patriots-Chargers game, right? Avert your eyes, the toughest watch of Week 13. That game, between the weather, between the offensive lack of performance. I will give a shout-out, though. You want to talk about someone that's being left behind on a sub-500 team? The Patriots in this last 3 games, not giving up more than 10 points in 3 straight games and losing every single one of them. We gave some love to the Jets yesterday on defense for what they've been able to do in the face of adversity, where their quarterbacks don't even want to go back out there and play for the team. They've been so bad. The Patriots have been abject dreck. It's been a disaster, and all this defense has done is respond by tightening the screws and doing everything humanly possible. This has been a couple of years, by the way, of the Pats defense having to try and buoy an otherwise disaster of an offense. So salute to those guys, man. They dealt with a bunch of key injuries very early on in the season. Christian Gonzalez, their rookie first-round pick, among them, and they've responded by going out there and doing absolutely everything they can to give them a chance to win.
And we always talk about, I certainly do as a former defensive player, you have an excellent defense and you're going to be in every game. And New England can do that. But this offense is just so bad. It just goes to show what happens when you miss on a first-round quarterback. And it's another team that missed and haven't really helped themselves around that to this point. On how bad they are. And then the Chargers still are the most underachieving team, because you sit there and list off the assets that they have and cannot believe that there is futile on offense as they are. Again, give credit to the New England defense, but that just absolutely blows my mind. So, yeah, I don't think there's anywhere outside of the Patriots, and because you throw in the Chargers only putting up 6 points in this one, that this was just an absolutely awful game.
It's such a weird departure, Dad, because remember, for so long, and I understand it was with a different staff and it's a much smaller sample size, but you always think back during the Belichick era, even with Brady, his calling card was making it work. The year Brady goes down with the knee injury, all they do is win 11 games with Matt Castle under center and propel him to future riches. You have Tom Brady go down, and you've got Jimmy Garoppolo winning games. You had the Jacoby Brissett game in there that helped launch his career when he was one of the backups in New England. Like, they were always able to find a way to make it work with these guys. I don't know if there's ever been a bigger lose-lose than Josh McDaniels leaving the nest in New England. Every time he's there, you seem to be able to cobble something together, and every time he leaves, not only do they suffer, but Josh McDaniels away from New England loses all his superpowers and turns into a pumpkin.
So here's the question. Do we think Bill Belichick is gone, that they'll mutually part ways and he'll end up somewhere else? Or do we think he brings the band back again? Does Josh McDaniels end up back in New England again, where Bill O'Brien is the OC? They actually have an offensive coordinator this year who has been an offensive guy instead of whatever the hell they tried the other year. But you wonder, if Bill is coming back, would Josh McDaniels come back as well as the coordinator? Because he ain't going to get a head coaching job anywhere. He is not getting a head coaching job again in the NFL, I don't believe.
I've always said, maintain this season, Bill's going to go out on his terms, but I think it has to be his terms, somewhere else now. There's no way, if you're Bob Kraft, you can justify bringing it back with how lost it's looked. It hasn't looked bad.
Yeah.
They've looked lost out there on the field in New England. And then to compound that with Josh McDaniels, who's coming off of the shame of everything that went on in Las Vegas and how much better they've looked without him. Optics shouldn't ultimately govern everything about a decision, but it'd be really hard to sell that to a fan base and use that as a reason for them to want to come back out and watch Patriots football in 2024.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. How about we check in with some Super Bowl odds right here? So here's who DraftKings thinks has the best shot at winning it all this season through 13 weeks. So biggest change in odds, guys, as you look at this from the start of the season belongs to the Dolphins. So they were plus 2,500 before week 1 to now plus 650, third best odds to win it all. Above them, you got the Eagles at plus 550, 49ers at plus 310. So guys, feel free to discuss this, okay? Let's talk ceilings, let's talk floors. Do we think there's going to be any big changes here in this group at the top?
Yeah, this is really interesting to consider, Dad. We were just mentioning this off air. This feels like the opposite of college football season, where right now in the college football playoff, we got 4 teams that could absolutely all win a national championship. It is accessible to everybody because there's no one great team in college football this year. There's a bunch of very good teams, but all of them have flaws. The NFL's got one great team right now. It's got the San Francisco 49ers. I could argue on their best day, the Baltimore Ravens are probably pretty close in terms of what they present in potency on both sides of the football, but I think the 49ers have showed in their most high-profile matchups this year, there's a gap, when healthy, between them and the rest of the NFL to where I think their floor and their ceiling are both very high, Dad. Like, you look at what that team's capable of, I'd be stunned. You're getting close to like barring, again, it's always barring injury, but barring injury, that feels like a put in pen in the NFC Championship at the very least as the floor for that team based on what we've seen in big moments.
Mike, I would say 2, 4, 6 teams have a legitimate shot to win the Super Bowl. I would go the 6 end the list. 49ers, Eagles, Dolphins, Chiefs, Cowboys, Ravens. I would stop then. The next teams would be like the Jaguars, the Lions, in that area. But I would stop at Baltimore. Given the best chance, I think, to the 49ers are just that. And, oh, by the way, remember, they had a Chase Young who was, just revived in San Francisco. I would have the Eagles next from the floor-ceiling standpoint. I think I might – I don't know. Am I sleeping on Miami? I did pick Miami to win that division. I love them offensively. But I'm wondering if I would put Chiefs, Cowboys, Ravens as a higher ceiling above them, mainly the Cowboys because of the way Dak is playing right now and what a monster matchup we have with Philadelphia going to the Cowboys when the Cowboys are playing their best ball right now. The Chiefs are still led by the best quarterback in the game in Patrick Mahomes. And the Ravens have just a phenomenal defense and a quarterback who can change the game on a dime. So I do think it stops there. I don't know if you have any other teams that you think can win, but I think the 49ers as a whole, and again, we can never predict injury, but if they are whole going into the playoffs, man, it's hard to see anybody stop them. They just seem so complete at this point.
Yeah, I was just going to say all of the complaining that we heard from the 49ers after last year's NFC Championship game feels a little more justified after this last weekend. Like, they're out here whooping people's asses. So I do think it's a drop-off there. And I think with the Eagles now, right, we're invited to ask questions. They announced the signing of Shaq Leonard before the Cowboys game as the former Colts linebacker had visited both teams. So I don't know, I don't know if he's going to be on the field for this one, if they're going to be able to get him up to speed that quickly or whatever. But at the very least, a little bit awkward in there, but sort of an acknowledgement also, as we've seen Howie Roseman having to tinker with this roster towards the back half of the season. Like, we all looked at that Kevin Byard signing at the trade deadline and did that he can't keep getting away with this stuff. But now as we look up at it, it's more, oh no, these are crimes of necessity right now because the Eagles this offseason let some players in important positions walk, especially in that linebacker room, and are kind of having to pay for it on the other side now and again, part of it's injury, right? You expected Nakobe Dean to be out there. Zach Cunningham also dealing with some injury stuff. And so you're having your depth tested in a way, but part of that is also like, hey, maybe your plan A at those positions, as you had to account for finally paying the quarterback, wasn't exactly as dialed in as it should have been. And so there's kind of been an acknowledgement from both of those teams that we've also seen get bodied by the best team in the NFC, the best team in football that stick in our craw. Let me put it this way, Dad. Who do you have more confidence at this point? Philadelphia has the head-to-head win, but as you get set to call this one, who would you be in favor of? Who would you favor right now between Dallas and the Eagles?
I think Dallas is playing better now, but maybe much like San Francisco, when Philadelphia, if and when they get healthy and get their players back, because with linebackers being down, they've been susceptible in the middle of the field. So in this one, again, as I get ready to call it, look for Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson, the first time they played, had 7 catches for just under 100 yards and 1 touchdown then. Now, Philly, and Philly's also been hurting in the secondary a bit. Now they're hurting a linebacker. So could Jake have another one of those games in the middle of the field against Philadelphia, because they still have to worry about CeeDee Lamb, on the outside. So they can be a little susceptible there. So I would say at this point, the Cowboys have been playing better, and some of that has to do with injury, just like we saw when San Francisco lost 3 in a row, no Trent Williams, no Deebo Samuel, and how it can affect the team. So can Philly get healthy by the time they need to? But if Dallas pulls this one off at home this weekend, all of a sudden they're both 10-3. In the top of that division, and they split for the season. So then it is a race to the end of the year to see who wins that division.
I will say that one's a fascinating matchup too. You mentioned Jake Ferguson, but the other day when we talked to Emmitt Smith on this program about the difference, he said Mike McCarthy's opened up the offense a little more. Last time Philly and the Dallas Cowboys played, Brandon Cooks, 1 reception for 2 yards 1 reception on 2 targets for 7 yards in that game. Since then, 173 yards, 42 yards, 72 yards, 45 yards, 3 touchdowns in that time span as well. He's become a much bigger part of that offense. He's a guy that you can certainly have affect multiple areas of the field. So it is one that, as that secondary in the middle of the field have become a concern, that's the kind of value add that all of a sudden makes you wonder at this juncture. And we know the other side, the Eagles' rushing attack versus Dallas and the rushing defense that we've seen be a problem still at times could absolutely be a bad matchup, but that Dallas offense looks like it's ready to make the Eagles hurt in all the wrong places.
And let me just say this again. It's amazing how everything's quieted down about Mike McCarthy. That's the one thing I get a little tired of in the media is how quickly people want somebody fired. And everybody's been after Mike McCarthy's job for a bit. And boy, he's been doing the job this year, right? And all of a sudden things get a little quiet around him when all of a sudden your quarterback isn't throwing 15 interceptions. Remember, coaches don't throw interceptions. Coaches don't fumble the ball. Coaches don't miss tackles. Players do that, and Dak had a turnover issue last year that he doesn't have this year. If you want to blame McCarthy for that, okay. I'm still going to put it more on the players who have to execute on the field. But yeah, I got awfully quiet about Mike McCarthy saying he should be gone as a head coach, which it should be quiet because he's doing a heck of a job.
I think some of the appropriate criticisms for Mike McCarthy are more long-term. Like, this is still either the most or the second most penalized team in all of football, which usually falls under the coach's purview when that happens. We've still seen end-of-half, end-of-game Mike McCarthy struggling managing certain situations that ultimately fall under the purview of the head coach. And a little bit different this year now that he's back as the offensive play caller. There's more on your plate, but I think there are apt criticisms there for a guy who also isn't new. I think this is Mike McCarthy's baggage from the end of Green Bay always following him in a place like Dallas where you're going to get an outsized amount of control. Very quickly, Dad, the Lions and the Jags that we talked about as the two teams that we learned a lot about. Lions find a way on the road in a game they probably should have won by more. Jags stub their toe big time at home. It seems like teams trending in wildly different directions after this week.
Well, and we have to wait and see what we hear about Trevor Lawrence. If he misses a couple of weeks, we'll see. In that division, they're only one loss ahead of Indianapolis at this point. And if they lose Trevor for a couple of weeks, that could change the landscape. And I like Detroit, the two-headed monster in the backfield. Sam Laporta has been phenomenal as a rookie tight end, how they're going at him. You have on St. Brown as well and what he's done at receiver. So I do like their potential out there for sure.
There's a lot of potential. They are the one that feels like ceiling and floor are the farthest apart, where I absolutely think they're going to be a playoff team this year, but I could also see them losing very early, or we've seen they've got enough talent offensively to maybe even make a run to something like the NFC Championship if it hits right for them. But that team feels like there's a big gulf between what's possible and what's not there.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. There are 43 total bowl games, so let's talk about that. That includes 2 college football playoff semifinals, national championship game on January 8th, of course. But I want to talk about some of the better bowl game names.
Yes.
In my opinion, that I found. So these are my favorite 3 when I was just scrolling through. Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
I like that one. Famous Idaho Potato Bowl, because I just think it's funny that these potatoes are so famous because they're from Idaho. And then Avocados from Mexico Cure Bowl. So just like, okay. And then, so obviously we always have some great names, but we got to also talk about the Duke's Mayo Bowl, trolling GoJo. GoJo, that was hysterical. I watched the video. I mean, like, there's a photo of you. It's actually so funny. So let's just take a look at it.
Welcome to the Duke's Mayo Bowl House. As we prepare for Selection Sunday, we're going to go over the do's and don'ts for the teams rushing our sorority. Follow me.
But he loves mayo.
We don't date jocks. Thanks, y'all, for visiting the Duke's Mayo Bowl House. Remember, we can only select you if you're an ACC, SEC, or Notre Dame.
But he loved mayo. That's your legacy.
Yeah, what a bummer,
I was
Mike.
bamboozled. I was told that picture was going to be used to be the likeness for a statue that was going to go outside of the stadium for the bowl game for my contribution to Mayo culture and the Duke's Mayo Bowl in general. I have been bamboozled, run amok, led astray by people I thought were my friends and cared about me, and instead used me to shamelessly promote their bowl game by slandering my good name in a very, very clever campaign using the sorority culture that's been very popular on TikTok. The Duke's Mayo Bowl really does not miss.
Can I ask you a question? That if now they asked you for a picture, obviously, and in the position you are,
they
you,
did
you
for the
represent
statue.
Certain things. So they're asked for. Sometimes we get asked for our bios or for a photo. Anytime you're asked for that, do you automatically send a picture of you with hair?
Well, I like to send that picture because I look like what if overweight high school Jesus decided to walk on and try out the football team. Like, I don't know if we've got just the still of that photo, but they are luscious locks. It is a glorious beard. That was me in my absolute prime. I was coming off a time in high school where at my Catholic high school, we weren't allowed to have hair that touched your collar. So I had short hair and I couldn't wear a long beard. And so I got to college and did the normal teenager thing, which is rebel against everything that I had been told I needed to do before and turn myself into fat Jesus. So that's why I use that particular photo. God, bare arms, no tattoos. What a simple time for that young
Also,
Mike.
I just want to point out this thing that Catholic schools do. A tweet about this went viral earlier this year. It was like, Catholic schools be like, no long hair on boys. And then there's a picture of the main boy everywhere, and he has long hair. It was Jesus.
100%. Main boy was out there with the flowing locks, and for some reason we're supposed to emulate him everywhere else. We are literally supposed to be built in the likeness of God, if you believe that book, and yet we cannot even wear our hair in the likeness of that man. Tell me how. Make it make sense, Dad.
But Jesse, it was amazing in high school how they had to keep their hair short. Then when both of them got to school, man, they grew it out. You saw Mike's there. Jake grew his long as well. They were like rebelling off that rule and said, we're just going to do it and see how it is for a while until you realize all that hair under a helmet in August and September isn't the best thing in the world for you. And you kind of, after you rebel for a little bit, you kind of find your line. Unfortunately, Mike, for you, the line was found for you. Sorry.
I'll tell you what, though, to that end, and I can tell you this, fellas, if you're going off to college and you're thinking about doing this, especially if you play football, and you're like, man, the hair out of the back of the helmet's a great look, I'm going to beard it up and all this. If even Chris Hemsworth looks better with shorter hair, fellas, you ain't the one. Every single one of my friends, so many of them offensive linemen who decided to go to college with the lettuce leaking out of the back of the helmet or the big long grizzly beard, all looked way less ugly once we cut our hair. So it's going to feel good at the time. It's a rite of passage, and you're going to come out on the other side and wonder how you lived that way for so long.
I can confirm
we
that.
sit here, you are right. I agree with you. And we sit there and look at all the bowl games. I have a bowl name for that I think is the best bowl. But, I mean, you've got Cricket Celebration Bowl. You've got, as Jesse mentioned, Avocados from Mexico Cure Bowl. You've got the Starco Brands Bowl, Radiance Technology Independence Bowl, Famous Toastery Bowl. I mean, the names of bowl games are amazing. But if I am 21, older than 21 or older, I am happy as hell to go to the, is it pronounced Isleta or Isleta? I'm going to go Isleta, New Mexico Bowl, which is New Mexico State and Fresno State. Because people are saying, what is Isleta? Isleta is a resort and casino. So if I'm 21 or older, senior on that team, or 21 or older, and I want my gift bag that you get at everyone, I want it just filled with chips. Just give me chips, baby, because I can legally gamble, put us up in the resort, in the casino, and let us have at it.
You've also got Starco Brands LA Bowl hosted by Gronk. That should be a pretty good time.
Oh, my God. What a party.
Honestly, yeah. Basically, just Gronk Beach became a bowl game from the Super Bowl. Sign me up for that one. Dad, I'm sure that's exactly what the NCAA wants, is more college kids with close, ready proximity to gambling. The state of Iowa should be Iowa versus Iowa State in that bowl game, and we should let them fight. And all of this happening because we have 43 total bowl games this season, including the obviously college football playoff semifinals mixed in that as well. I, for one, am happy to see the Bad Boy Mowers Bowl back in. It is now the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl in New York. It was formerly the Bad Boy Mowers Gasparilla Bowl. Shout out to my guys in Schroff and Roddy Jones, the original Bad Boy Mowers, the only bowl game that would just put full-on riding mowers down on the sideline of the field. I don't know how that's going to work in December in New York, but God gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. Dad, I did want to let you know, because we'll have plenty of time to get into the matchups, and there are some really good ones when we talk about the New Year's 6 matchups. Florida State and Georgia in the Factory of Sadness Bowl. Ohio State, Missouri in the Cotton Bowl. No clue who's going to be the quarterback for the Buckeyes at this point. Oregon versus Liberty in the Fiesta Bowl, which I'd imagine that's going to not probably be a great time for Liberty against that Oregon team, unless, Bo Nix might not be playing at that point. We never know. That's kind of the tough part about all this. Notre Dame and Oregon State playing in the Sun Bowl. Great matchup on paper, but unfortunately, DJ not going to be there anymore. Jonathan Smith, their coach, not gone. For Notre Dame, we're not sure what the opt-out situation looks like yet, but how we got there is a great reminder that college football's entire system is nonsense. Everything about college football is nonsense. There's never been anybody running or in charge of this sport, and quite honestly, I was talking about this yesterday. Shout out to the College Football Now podcast, CFSM. College football probably in the future, if it were ever going to try and remedy situations like we saw with Florida State this weekend, would need someone full-time. People always advocated for NFL to make full-time referees. College football probably needs people full-time in charge of this, not just a part-time committee of people trying to decide the fate of the sport on a whim once we hit November. And that is nowhere more reflected than this, Dad. So when FSU got snubbed, it delayed the bowl process. Every bowl's got contracts with certain conferences throughout the year. And when you have this trickle-down of Florida State not making the CFP, it moves everyone down the rung on those contracts. And a lot of the ACC contracts will include a clause that also includes Notre Dame. And so the prolonged process ended with this. And Stuart Mandel over at SI wrote this article, I believe, this is in The Athletic, but the prolonged process delayed selection for the conference's next tier of bowl games, the Duke's Mayo Bowl, the Pinstripe Bowl, and the Sun Bowls in El Paso. The process for all 3 bowls, they submitted their top teams. Notre Dame was their top choice for all of them because, as we found out with the Sun Bowl, that game sold out in 24 hours because Notre Dame moves paper. Per an ACC official, the league followed its prescribed process for placing these teams in the bowl games by having its attorney write each bowl's name on a piece of paper and drawing it out of a hat. That is the scientific process that college football operated by here. We wrote the names down on a paper and we picked them out like we were doing a white elephant party at Christmas.
Yeah. You know what, though? That sounds about right for the NCAA. It sounds about right for the dreck of leadership that there is in the NCAA, that's how they produce this. And I'm quite honestly, I'm glad they got the Sun Bowl, not the Pinstripe Bowl. You and I called the Pinstripe Bowl one year. Wonderful at Yankee Stadium in New York, but cold as hell. Don't need that, even though it was cold last time you guys played in the Sun Bowl.
So glad people are so worried about protecting the sanctity of these bowl games from player opt-outs as we write on paper. All right, time to get to this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to finish off your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on DraftKingsNetwork.com, the DraftKings YouTube channel that you should be subscribed to for all of the great content from the members of our DraftKings network here. And, of course, you can get us Samsung TV Plus, Roku, wherever you get it. And if you missed any of the show, Apple Podcast, it's available right here on YouTube as soon as we get done live each and every day. And speaking of great content, you can also get the Vegas Stats and Information Network's new college football bowl guide is here, and it is free to DraftKings players. You're going to get picks for every side and total made by broadcasting legend Brent Musburger, VSiN analyst Steve Makinen, as well as my dad and myself. We went out here and threw our hat into the ring for this one in the last couple of days. You're going to get previews of the college football playoff semifinals, need to know trends, strategies, so much more. Just go to vsin.com. That's VSIN.com/bowl guide to download your free guide today. Get yourself right for bowl season. But Dad, as we get to this, that, and third, one name that you will not be seeing during bowl season now on the Alabama roster will be Tyler Buckner, the former quarterback for the Crimson Tide and former Notre Dame Fighting Irish quarterback, was one of the names that was entered into the transfer portal. But not for football. Tyler Buckner, one-time great high school lacrosse player, and ironically enough, as the Tide gets set to face Michigan, former Michigan lacrosse commit, entered his name in the portal, and it is the understanding that he is intending, according to Terry Foy, great college lacrosse reporter, that Buckner will finish the football season with the Bama team and then intends to return to Notre Dame, where he will join the defending national champion Notre Dame lacrosse team with one of his first loves. Incredible prodigal son story from Tyler Buckner.
Could you imagine? So he's a quarterback at Notre Dame, and then he's gets a shot to be the quarterback at Alabama. Unfortunately, didn't work out, but he's on the team. He could win a national championship there, and then he's going to go back to Notre Dame and lacrosse to where he will now join the defending national champs. He could, in consecutive years, get a national championship ring in football and then one in lacrosse if Notre Dame went back-to-back. And, oh, by the way, if he's there watching a Notre Dame game and some travesty happens on the field where we lose a couple of quarterbacks, just hit the old right arm and point up into the stands. Let him run down in the stands, go put on a uniform, and help out at the quarterback position just because.
I was going to say, the Notre Dame football and lacrosse pipeline remains so strong. My former teammate, Will Yateman, was a two-sport athlete at Notre Dame. You've had guys like Nick Ocello in the past go from lacrosse to football. As recently this year as Jordan Faison, the wide receiver, who started off as a scholarship lacrosse player, ended up the end of the season as a scholarship football player who's still going to be playing lax in the spring, I'd imagine. And so all of this is just perfect harmony, and you'll love to see it again. So Tyler Buckner got a chance to double dip right now in a way that's got to be very exciting for him. Looking forward to it. Welcome home in advance, Tyler. We're happy to have you back on campus here. Enjoy getting to go over and hang out at Arlotta. Let's get to that, Jesse, as we are in Shohei season, in the MLB offseason, which means it's pitch season, which means some people are getting creative, including one sandwich shop in San Francisco.
Yeah, so Shohei could allegedly make a decision by the end of the week. So we have a San Francisco sandwich shop making a unique pitch here. So Ike's Lovin' Sandwiches is offering to change its name if Ohtani signs with the Giants. So he said if he's wearing a Giants uniform in 2024, Ike's Love and Sandwiches will be renamed to Shohei's Love and Sandwiches in a move that I'm sure is definitely going to move the needle for Shohei Ohtani.
Well, I mean, and also...
Take a bite. Let's eat at Ike's. So you saw Kevin Durant get free Ike's for life when he signed with the Warriors. And then we offered an Aaron Judge sandwich and free Ike's for life to Aaron Judge, and we know how that one turned out. And so for you, Shohei, I'm going to one-up this. If you sign with the San Francisco Giants, not only will we design a sandwich together and you'll get free Ike's for life, but instead of Ike's Love and Sandwiches, I'm going to rename it to Shohei's Love and Sandwiches.
Senior, you're ready to just go ahead, go in on this.
Listen, to me, signing for Food for Life would be good for me. One of the first deals when we were doing Mike and Mike, one of the first ones we had was Subway. And I remember telling my agent, have them pay me, give me a gold, give me that big time Subway card. Give me the card where I get free Subway. I don't want cash. My agent's like, hell no, 10% of a sandwich is no good. It's better than 10% of the money. I'm like, give me that card. That's all I want. So that would sway me. But this deal, Mike, kind of sounds like the Machine Gun Kelly. Hey, Travis Kelce, I'll give you $500,000 to leave Kansas City and go play for Cleveland, even though you signed like a $57-60 million deal. I don't think this is going to cut it for Shohei.
It would be funny, though, if Shohei, for like reasons not associated with this, still ended up in San Francisco and then all of a sudden came to collect. Because I don't think this guy's counting on this actually happen. This is great pub for him right now. He's going to have a couple days of shows like this, running with the story, getting his name out there, viral social media marketing, all the stuff. I want to see him actually have to make good on this because it looks like this is that guy's name. Like he appears to be Ike. And so if that's the case, then all of a sudden now having to put Shohei up there, wonder how that one goes over. Probably would still be good for business, but I just want to see him actually have to do it because I don't think he's going to.
I want Shohei to show up with his little dog. Like, all right.
Yeah.
Let's go. Change the name.
Looking on the Ike social media page, and by the way, that's a great call. Shohei's dog does need to be at the press conference. This needs to be like Nike Bill Belichick's dog, where he doesn't do any more appearances without him. One-time NFL draft star, Nike Belichick. Looking at the Ike's Twitter account, though, they really leaned into the social media stuff. They did Ike's version as a Taylor Swift ode there. They did Mike's Spotify rap list at the end of the year. So on the cutting edge as far as sandwich shops, which is maybe not always what I'd expect from a guy with a soul patch, but everyone's allowed to defy the expectations every once in a while. Let's get to the third. We've talked a lot about the transfer portal today for football players. Jesse, apparently the transfer portal also open for actors.
Yeah, so apparently Nicolas Cage just discovered like television. He's starred in over 100 movies. He just did an interview with Uproxx where he basically was like, yeah, episodic television. Like, I just saw Breaking Bad, and now I think, like, I want to stop doing movies and get into TV. And I feel like, you know, the reasons behind all of this, because he's been in a lot of movies lately. You remember he had to, like, file for bankruptcy a few years back. He was buying, like, dinosaur skulls and stuff like that. And, like, he just basically went broke. And now he's like, yeah, so I've done hundreds of movies, and now here I am ready to make the move to television, which cracks me up because he's talking about it like he literally just discovered that there's TV.
And Dad, this seems like it would be right up your alley because for someone that anyone unaware, my dad consumes more television than any person that's ever been born or ever will be born. If you've seen it, he's already seen every season of it and 3 movies that have come with it along the way. My dad, I think, is still watching seasons of Hell on Wheels that weren't released to the public. And so, Dad, a Nicolas Cage-led show feels right up your alley, especially given the kind of movies that he's made over the years.
Oh, and I watch them all. The Rock, he was in, with Sean McConnery. I love Con Air. If I'm flipping channels and I go by Armageddon or Con Air, I'm there. I know Armageddon's obviously not a Nick Cage movie, but that's one of the movies I stop at. I stop at Con Air as well because I love hearing Nick Cage's accent in that movie. But I stop and watch it all the time. But I love what he said. He said, I've seen things that can be done now with characters on TV and they're given time to express themselves. He said, I saw Bryan Cranston stare at a suitcase for an hour one episode on Breaking Bad. We don't have time to do that in a feature film. So maybe television is the best next step for me. So, hey, he's trying to diversify. One thing he says I will agree with as you get older and you like to do it. He said the one thing about doing TV, episodic TV, is you get to basically stay in one place. And he said I'd like to be around family more, where a movie you got to fly to different places. So he does like that about it. But you're right, Jesse and Mike. It does seem like he just found out what TV is and said, oh, yeah, you know what? I might want to try that now.
Yeah, he said he's a student also, and he's learned so much from movies, but maybe he has something left to learn from TV.
He said, I don't know if I have anything else to learn in cinema. Nicolas Cage has maxed out cinema. He's got everything that you could possibly want out of that. Nothing more that you could teach Nicolas Cage. Master of the silver screen here. And again, we could all joke, I'm a watch. If Nick Cage is on a TV show, I'm a watch. We hope you feel the same way about watching us each and every day. If you do, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us that 5-star rating. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.